Hey guys, it's Elena. Today I wanted to do a mixed media piece that I have not planned in advance because I recently had a request from someone who wanted to hear more about my thought process as I'm creating an abstract art piece. And so I have a basic concept in mind having to do with blobby ink circles, but other than that I have not planned this beforehand, so I'm just going to take you with me as I make decisions about what I want to do, what colors I want to use, what brushes I want to use, and why. So we'll see how it goes. Anyway, let's go ahead and get started. So I am in Procreate, and I will make a new canvas that is 3000 by 2000 pixels wide. And I will be using my mixed media brush set. And I will also be using my Ephemera Stamps brush set that comes with the mixed media package. So as far as colors, I think that I would like to use my mixed media dark color palette. This comes with the brushes. So I decided, or I wanted to make some inky blobby circles and then sort of create a piece around that. So I'm thinking about colors, and I think I would like to use this darkish brown for the ink blob, and I'm going to use my Gloopy Ink brush. I could also use the ink blot brush. They are a little bit different in that the ink blot has more of a bleed on the edges, and the Gloopy Ink has more of a rounded blobby look to it, and that's the one that I want to go with. And right now I'm thinking about, in terms of like what areas of the page do we want to cover. So I'm thinking that I would like to have something down in this corner and then have some white space around it, and maybe a little something, a couple little things here, but I think my focal point is going to be down in the corner here. And when I'm doing abstract pieces, a lot of times before I start, I will think about what areas of the canvas are going to be a focus. So I'll kind of squint my eyes at the canvas and think, you know, where is my focus area going to be? Where does it feel right today? I don't know if that makes any sense, but that's kind of part of my process. So I've got my Gloopy Ink brush selected, and I'm going to draw a circle and use quick shape to turn it into more of a perfect circle. Kind of the idea here is that, like, if I've got like a cup or a bowl, if I was using analog media, that I would then dip that in paint or ink or something and then make a mark on the canvas with that. So that's kind of the idea of what I'm going for here. So I'm using my, it's up like a little more than halfway as far as the size. And I'm just going to let my hand shake like so much. And it doesn't matter if this is a circle or not at this point. I just want it to have, I want to have a really irregular, gloopy looking line. And now I'm holding without letting my pen go up. And you see that an ellipse has been created. It's not a perfect circle, but I'm touching the screen and now it is. And I'm letting my pen up on that. So now I'm just going to have a look at this circle that I've created. And I like it, but I think that these blobs are really big. So I'm going to resize that. It's on a layer by itself because I have not put anything else on that layer. So I'm free to go to my arrow button up here and resize that smaller. And I think that is fine. I can also move it around. I'm going to move it down because that's just what I feel like doing. No reason really for that. I'm actually going to move it up a little bit and then maybe make a thinner line around it. So I'm going to take this down a bit and now hopefully have, oops, a bit of a thinner line. Still gloopy and irregular, but not quite as much. Holding again, finger on the screen again. And now I'm just having a think about whether I want this to be centered on top of it or if I want to Oh, and you know what I've done? I've actually done them both on the same layer now. So if I want to change one of these, I actually have to redo it. I think I'm okay with this. I think I'm gonna leave this like it is for now. And I'm going to make a new layer and add a couple more ink blobs in some other areas, but none as big as this one. So I was thinking something like here. I'm gonna do something similar. Hold, touch, let it go. And I'm not sure how I feel about it facing up. So because I've made a new layer, I can resize this and change it as needed. So I'm taking this little green handle and turning it around. And I think I'd like it pointing up. So now I'm just having a think. I think I want to have another sort of overlapping circle here. So I'm going to add a new layer and then make a bit of an overlap here. And I want to have the mouth, the open mouth of it, just pointing in a slightly different direction here. So we've got some overlap going on here. Let's just see how this looks. I don't like that at all, so I'm getting rid of that. I think I want to make it a bit smaller. And so I'm just really varying my pressure because I didn't like that one, other one didn't have enough variation. I'm going to make that a bit smaller and move it around to see how I feel. I think that's fine. And maybe I want another one about here, just by itself. And I was thinking about putting one down here, but then I thought that might be too symmetrical to have like boom, boom, boom. So I just wanted it to be a little bit empty down there. So that was actually on the same layer as the previous one, but I think I'm just gonna leave it like that. I'm not always the best at remembering to put things in new layers, but because these are so far apart from each other, and these are actually not touching either, if I decide to, I can always go and select them, copy and paste them into a new layer if I need to. So I'm going to make a new layer on top of all that now. And I think I might try to go for something a bit messier. I'm trying to think whether I want to do oil pastels. I think I do. Because I think I wanted something messy because these are fairly clean looking, even though they're gloopy, but there's no texture. So I wanted to put something behind them. So I'm going to take this layer and put it all the way below everything else. And then I want to do some oil paint on here. So let's have a think about colors. I'd like this piece to be largely black and white with maybe a couple hints of this green and pink. But mostly I want it to be fairly neutral. I do really enjoy mixed media in neutral colors for some reason. I think because it feels a bit messy if it's really colorful and really messy as far as textures and all this, a bunch of different things going on. So I think that's why I like to keep it a bit more minimalist with the color palette. But I think I'm going to go for one of these grays down here, maybe the light peachy kind of gray here with oil pastel number 1. And I'm just going to start scribbling. I feel like we need something here, composition wise. And I'm trying to think, because I have had this request that, you know, some people would like to know what is going through my head when I make these decisions. And it's honestly, it's not very logical. It's really just like, I feel like something belongs here. And that's where I just kind of intuitively feel like I need to add something. And that's usually how I make these decisions. But anyway, I'll keep trying to talk you through it, and maybe it helps somebody. But I think maybe it has to do with the fact that there's a lot of ink on this blob here. So kind of drawing it outward into something more than just these blobs makes it more of a focal point here. Hope that makes sense. So the oil paint If you don't use a lot of pressure, it barely shows up at all. And then if you use a lot of pressure, it can get quite dark. So I'm just using a medium amount of pressure. And I just want to have a bit of a messy looking mark behind here. And maybe a tiny bit here as well. Again, I think it feels like it needs something back here because of this a bit more blobbiness on the ring. And then I do like to have, if I use one color on the main focal point, I like to also have that color underneath on the other side as well. Sometimes maybe that's not a good idea. If you want to have something really stand out, only use that color in that one spot. But I kind of wanted to have some symmetry here without it being too symmetrical. And it felt like the place to do it was where these were meeting. I'll do a bit more here. So now I want to take a few more colors. So maybe this more brownish, purplish gray in the corner here is a very technical term. Just adding a bit, darkening this in certain areas. So whenever I push kind of hard, then I'll get a big blob like this, but then I kind of like just soften the edges of it by using less pressure. But I'm not going to keep that there because I do want some white space here. I'm feeling like I could use some pink, so I'm going to select that light pink. It's still a bit gray, but this can be, maybe this is, maybe not. Let's see. It's a bit too gray still, I think. I'll just add a tiny bit of this, but then I might go to the more peachy pink that I have in the color palette. So I'm going to take this darker pinkish color and I'm going to switch brushes. So the reason I want to switch brushes now is because if I use that same brush, it's maybe just going to erase everything I just did. Whereas the oil pastel number 2 is a bit streakier. So what's underneath will show up a bit more. At least that's my thought. And I'm actually going to make that bigger and see if I can have it in a different direction, just for some different texture. That's okay. It's not quite what I expected to happen, but fine. I'm going to make the brush a bit smaller for this bit. So this is all a bit bland at the moment. I'm trying to think how I can spice it up a bit. Not sure if green is really the right color for this. I think I would like to add some text stamps and then sort of work around that. So I'm adding a new layer still underneath of the circles. I'll go back to that darkish brown color and the Ephemera Stamps, and this comes together with the mixed media brush set, and I'm just going to look for some script. So we've got a couple different styles here, and I'm just looking for something that might go well with this, something that's very kind of flowery looking and has more of a long shape. I'm thinking that number 1 actually might do the trick. So whatever you see pointing in this direction, this is like your pen in this direction, and that's how it's going to come out. So that is how it comes out, but I actually want it a bit bigger. And I like that. It's not quite straight, which is annoying me, so I'm just going to straighten that a little bit. It's kind of like coming out of the mouth of the circle. I think we're still crooked. Okay, I think that looks interesting. I'm trying to think what else I want to do here. I think that's enough of the stamps. So I think I would like to add some messy acrylic, and I'm still having a bit of hesitancy about color here because I don't want it to have a lot of different colors in it, but it's definitely needing more. So I'm going to choose this peach and then just try to start scribbling wherever it feels right. So let's just make a new layer, and this one can be on top of the script. So we've got the oil color behind it and then the paint layer on top. And I'm just going to scribble, make a couple of blobs. Sometimes, a lot of times really, I will spend a lot of time on a background and then end up mostly covering it up by layering, but I just feel like that is part of the process, and you still have little bits of the texture underneath peeking through, which makes the detail of the piece a lot more interesting, even if you kind of cover up a lot of what you've already done. I'm gonna switch to dry gesso because I want more texture. I feel like this is a bit boring texture wise. So I'm going to go with the pink this time and then mess around with, I'm gonna make the brush smaller. That feels too big. I'm gonna kind of mess around with this a bit just to soften the edges. Add another color, add a bit more texture. Now I've still got the dry gesso brush selected, but I'm going to white, and I'm going to make this a bit bigger. And that is because I always just like to add a little bit of white to messy paint areas like this, because I just feel like it gives a bit more dimension, a bit more texture. So I'm not using a lot of pressure, it's not coming out solid white, but it's just adding some scratchy looking texture to this. I'm just doing the same thing here, just getting right up to the pixels here. And just kind of smearing everything out, and it just looks like a big pixely mess at the moment, but when you zoom out, hopefully it's a bit more interesting. I do really like using this brush in white because it's not, you know, it's not pure white, it comes with a darkened edge, so you can still add a lot of subtle texture using this brush in white. Going back down here a bit. And it's probably important to note I am still in the same layer as this acrylic because I do want it to actually interact and drag the color around. Maybe I'm gonna just do a bit here as well. And I wonder if I could actually add some texture behind this text, kind of coming out from here. Maybe make that brush quite large and just add some texture here. I don't want it to look like a frame around this, so I'm going to kind of let it come out a bit as well. So this is still white space, but it's just looking a bit more textured now, like the canvas has been scraped over with some gesso. I'm not a huge fan of just a plain white background. I like white space, but I want it to be a bit more textury. So I'm just adding very, very, very subtle texture here. You can barely see it, but it just makes our canvas look a little more realistic. And apparently I'm just going to do this over the entire canvas. Okay, I'm happier with how the canvas is looking now. Just gonna have another think about this. Sometimes I like to go out further and then zoom back in. I think we're clearly missing some color and some texture. We have some sort of peachy gray pink vibe going on here. So I'm trying to think what colors would look good with this. I might actually switch palettes because I feel like I could use some blue, some of these grayish blues, and maybe even a bit of this pastel green as well. So I'm going to select the middle pastel green here, and then this becomes my dominant color palette. This is my mixed media pastels, which also comes with the brush set. And with that green selected, I want to make a new layer and put it below what I've been doing. Then I might add a little bit of green below, and the reason that I've done that is because I don't want it to interact with what I have on this paint layer here. I'm happy about that, and I don't want to mess it up too much. I just want some green showing underneath of these. So I'm gonna smear around, still with the gesso brush, some of this green for a bit more dimension here. And now I might do the same with this very light blue color. Maybe it won't look any different, to be honest. I'm gonna make that a bit smaller. There's a bit of blue there, yes, it's coming out blue. Very subtle, but it's okay. So now we do have a bit more color, even though it's quite pastel and really barely there, but at least it is a few more colors. Now I think I'd like to add some embellishments. So enough of the paint, and with the embellishments I do want them to be on top of the paint. So I'm adding a new layer above that paint layer. And maybe I should actually label these. I'm not very good at remembering that sometimes, but I'm going to go ahead and label them. So we've got oil pastel on the bottom. We've got script here. We've got paint 1 and paint 2. And this one is going to be embellishments, which have not been added yet. We've got our rings. Okay, back to embellishments. Let's have a look at the brushes. So we've got dotted lines, which are always nice for embellishments. We've got some scribble called the Tangle brush. There's also paper and cloth and stitches. So I'm trying to think what I would like to put on here. I think I'd really like to have some stitches going around this outer edge to reinforce this circle. So I'd like to have just a lot of sort of reinforcement down here to kind of make that more of a focal point than it is. So the stitches, I'm going to go with so we're in a different color palette now than we had previously used, but I think that's okay. I think I want to try the dark grayish blue for the stitches. And we'll start with the running stitch. This is just the basic sewing machine stitch. And I'll put a little bit on the outside here. And let's do it again in the greenish color here. Maybe a smaller one this time. And let's switch to a different stitch. Let's use the back stitch in the blue. And I'll make this one a bit smaller. I'm just trying to add variety. It's quite small, so let's make that bigger. I'm trying to add a variety of different kinds of stitches that are kind of messy and have this overlapping to them. Let's do a lighter stitch and bigger. So I'm trying to vary the shape and, oh sorry, I'm trying to vary the size and the color. Actually, I think I don't like that. I think I want to do pure white. So I have it in my history here, but you can double tap over here. And if you're ever wondering if you have pure white selected, I kind of go to the value to check this. And if this is all the way over to, if this B line is all the way over to here and you've got F's here, then that is white. Because sometimes it looks like white, but it's not. And then, yeah, it's always good to know. So this is very light and not exactly showing up. I think I'm actually going to put that on the inside here where it shows up a bit more and then make that smaller. I do like that. Maybe just a tiny bit here. Oh, it really just doesn't show up at all. Maybe here. I think that works. And we can put some more white here as well. Maybe just kind of sewing around. So I think this over here needs a bit more work. I was thinking to choose this sort of peachy light color and going to Messy Multi-Stitch. This one has a variety of colors in it based on the color you choose, and can help if you're looking for something kind of messy, to just make something look a bit messier. So I'm gonna actually make this a darker color, maybe that one, and then keep going over it. Make that smaller, have another go down here. And maybe also here. This one is good if you just want it to look a bit random. I think I'm going to keep that color, go back to my running stitch, and make a bigger running stitch. I think that's okay. I do feel like this here is a bit boring. I'm trying to figure out how to make it more interesting. Maybe we could use a zigzag stitch in a bright color. Maybe along here. Maybe actually we could do that on top of the rings. Yeah, let's just give it a go and see. Maybe a bit bigger. I think that works okay. I'm just trying to think what else we need embellishment wise. I think a splatter. Let's go with Sparse Splatter. And I want to try it in white right here. It's kind of an accent to the script. So let's make it fairly large and just, oops, that's a bit too large. A bit like that, kind of like just taking a toothbrush and spraying some paint on that. And maybe a bit of it here as well. And here. And maybe also in a different color, still a pastel color. Maybe this blue. Let's give it a go. I think that's okay. Maybe let's skip this one and just do a bit here. I think I'd like to maybe add a flower. Let's just have a look at the flowers. Let's try this light color with the flower number 3. Let's add that as a layer right above the oil pastel. Because it's a light color, it might work to just overlap. I'm gonna just move this around, see where I like it. I think it's a bit crooked. So I still feel like something is missing and that maybe I need to have a bit more balancing, like to have something here. So I was thinking that I'll go ahead and choose this dark brown color and go back to my Ephemera Stamps, and I wanted to have some more script but going sideways and have it be something kind of skinny. So I'm just looking for something like that. Actually, you know, now that I look at this number 18, this one has a bit of a sideways and some straight up and down writing on it, and I thought maybe this one but in a lighter color. So maybe more of a peach color like this, so that it's not really showing but it's there. So we do have a new layer on top of the paint and underneath of the rings, so that's where I do want it. Actually, no, I do want it on top. We'll see how it looks on top and then maybe we'll move it under. So we've got this peach color. Let's just try, I think I'm gonna make it a bit bigger and try it this ways. A bit smaller. I think I want to try a different, lighter color, really light color. And I do like that, so is that on the same layer as something? I'm just gonna get rid of that and then make a new layer. I'm not sure what it's on the same layer as, but okay. So let's just straighten that and put it right up in the corner. And let's try it underneath of the paint just to see. I actually like it better under the paint because then we've got some fading going on parts of it. So I think that's more interesting. And I feel like we could just use one more thing, maybe like a flower stamp. So let's add a new layer on top of that. And I think it should be pink. So let's find a flower, maybe 23. That one be here and a bit smaller. That was a bit too, that one's a bit too much in line with the other flower, so I wanted to move it up here. See how that looks. I don't know if that's a bit too much pink going on, so I'm going to try it again in maybe this grayish blue color. I think I like that better. So let's move it over here. Maybe a bit smaller. I'm thinking smaller is good because then it's not exactly the same size as that one, since this is our focal area and this is our accent area. I'm just going to try it in a couple places here. I like it there. It's kind of coming out of this ring. I'm just going to try it on top of the paint. See if I like that better. I think I do like that one on top of the paint. I'm just going to tweak it a little bit more. I wanted it to be almost just coming straight out of that. Yeah, I like that. So I think that I'm done with this. I might come back to it at some point. I still feel like it's color-wise, there's not a lot going on, but I think you kind of have to search for the color, which makes it maybe a little bit more interesting. But I think that I'm done with this for now. So thank you so much for watching, and I hope that this was helpful to you in some way, and I will see you next time.